The sky in Siberia changes quickly. A blue so deep it aches, streaked by clouds, swollen with old snow, becomes a bruise as the sun dips toward the forest. By the time we are herded back to camp, the color has drained from the world. A bell clangs in the distance, sharp, metallic, a sound that belongs not to church but to a slaughterhouse. This is the hour when the wolves begin to watch from the tree line, the hour when we, too, become animals. Today's labor was timber cutting. We trudged in columns, 67 men from Barrack 7, flanked by 3 guards wrapped in their own cold, leather coats, battered fur hats, Mosin rifles resting easy on shoulders. The guards smoke as we work, sometimes flicking butts toward the snow. We are not allowed gloves, and the bark rips our hands raw. The cold numbs the sting until blood ices in the cracks. The work itself is survival. Swing the axe, haul the log, try not to collapse. Once I was a teacher. I wrote poetry for my wife and recited Pushkin to my daughter at bedtime. Now I work for calories. 2, maybe 3 slices of bread, a bowl of watery soup, a sliver of salted fish if the guards feel generous. I no longer know what month it is, only that the days have grown impossibly short, the nights long and merciless. I walk back from the tree line with the others, a shapeless mass in gray tunics and prison numbers. We do not speak. The snow muffles more than sound. It crushes thought. Only the crunch of boots and the occasional cough, deep, rattling, the kind that means someone will not survive until spring, remind me that I'm among men and not ghosts. The barracks loom in the dusk, hulking shapes of timber blackened by years of smoke and frost. Barbed wire glints in the weak light. The guard towers stand like silent judges, their machine guns fixed on the walkways. I pass the gates, eyes down. Never look a guard in the face unless you want a rifle butt in the teeth or worse. A trip to the punishment pit. Tonight, the air is thick with the stink of wet wool and fear. Inside Barrack 7 is chaos. Men jostle for position, for space near the stove that rarely works, for any scrap of warmth. The bunks are stacked 3 high, 40 on each side, a central aisle sticky with old soup and mud tracked in from the snow. There is no privacy. The only curtains are made from rags and sorrow. I find my place, middle bunk, 3rd from the door. My neighbor Yura was a violinist before the camps stole the music from his fingers. Now he guards a crust of bread with the ferocity of a cornered animal. Above, Peter from Leningrad coughs blood into a stained rag. His skin is waxy, eyes sunken. We all know what that means. There is a pact in the barracks. When death comes, we help each other as best we can. But sometimes mercy is beyond our reach. Dinner is announced by the shouts of the Nadziratel, the overseer. We file out, bowls in hand, shuffling past the guards who laugh and smoke and watch us like men might watch rats in a pit. The kitchen is a low shack behind the barracks, a place of steam and rot and the constant threat of violence. Tonight, the soup is little more than water, salted with tears and memories. I fish out a single cube of turnip, savoring it as if it were gold. Fights break out in line. Over a scrap of bread, a second helping, a place closer to the front. Violence here is a language as common as breathing. A tooth knocked out, a nose broken, a handful of hair torn free. These are punishments meted by the desperate. The guards rarely intervene unless someone is slow to move. Then their boots and truncheons speak in thunder. I watch as a boy, no more than 16, shipped from somewhere near Novgorod for stealing bread, drops his bowl. Soup splashes across the ice, instantly steaming in the cold. The men behind him snarl and shove. One of them, a man with a face like stone, punches the boy hard in the gut, knocking him to his knees. The guards jeer, but do not stop it. boy scrambles to his feet, clutching the empty bowl, his eyes wide with shame and fear. Tomorrow he may not get up at all. We eat in silence, hunched over tin bowls, licking them clean with the desperation of animals. The hunger here is not a pang, but a presence, a constant gnawing that blurs the mind and sharpens the worst in us. Some men hoard scraps in their boots or under filthy mattresses, risking a beating if discovered. Others barter, a piece of bread for a cigarette for a woolen sock, a sock for an hour closer to the stove. When dinner ends, we shuffle back inside. Some men play chess on a board scratched into the floor, using pieces shaped from bread and chewed paper. Others cluster in groups, sharing stories of the outside, though these stories grow fewer with each passing month, as hope thins like soup. Tonight, a new prisoner is thrown into Barrack 7. He lands hard on the floor, thrown by 2 guards whose laughter echoes long after the door slams. He is thin, trembling, one cheek swollen and split. We learn quickly not to ask names. Names are dangerous. Instead, we offer what we have: a rag to staunch the blood, a place near the stove. He refuses both, curling into himself, eyes wild and red-rimmed. Violence is constant here, but rarely random. There is a hierarchy: thieves, politicals, murderers, and the broken-hearted innocents who fell into the gears of state. The thieves rule the night, their knives fashioned from bits of metal filched from the workshop, hidden in boots or under tongues. If they want your bread, your coat, your life, you give it or you pay. Tonight, a thin man named Sergei, once a baker in Vladivostok, now nothing but ribs and fear, crosses the wrong man. A hiss, a scuffle, the dull thud of a fist against flesh. Sergei is left in a heap, blood trickling from his nose. No one moves to help. We all learn to look away. The barracks settle into uneasy quiet. Peter's cough is growing worse. The blood on his rag is brighter than before. He asks, voice thin as thread, for water. There's a bucket in the corner, half frozen, a thin film of ice on top. I break it with a spoon, offer him the cold water. He drinks, eyes closing in thanks. And for a moment, I remember the world before the barbed wire. Outside, the wind rises. It howls through the gaps in the walls, finding every weakness, every hole in the roof. We stuff rags and straw in the cracks, but nothing keeps out the cold. Some nights, men freeze to death in their sleep. Quiet, painless, almost merciful, compared to the other ways the camp can kill. There's a story whispered among the Zeks. Once a man lost his mind during the 3rd winter. He took off his clothes, walked into the woods and sang until the wolves found him. They say he was smiling when they dragged his body back. Tonight, I count my blessings. My coat, a crust of bread hidden in my sleeve. The warmth of Yura's shoulder pressed against mine. In the Gulag, kindness is as precious as food. A shared word, a scrap of song, can keep a man alive for another night. A guard comes in, boots thumping on the floorboards, flashlight slicing through the gloom. He barks names, checking the list. We answer one by one, voices dull with exhaustion. Any mistake means punishment, shackles, beatings, a night in the hole, a pit dug in the earth and covered with boards. No food or water, just cold and darkness. 2 nights ago, Mikhail disappeared. He was caught trying to trade a spoon for a scrap of meat. The guards dragged him outside, stripped him to his underwear, and left him tied to a post in the yard. We heard him screaming until the wind drowned his voice. In the morning he was gone. Some say he died, others that he was transferred to a worse camp. But we all know, no one returns from the posts. In the darkness, men whisper, confessions, secrets, bargains. A man offers me a story for a piece of bread. He was an engineer, sent here for complaining about a shipment of steel. His wife still writes, he says, though the letters are censored and few. I give him the bread. He tells me about the river near his home, the smell of lilacs in the spring, his daughter's laughter. I close my eyes, imagining the water, the flowers, the sound of a life that could have been mine. Sometimes we lose men at night. A fever burns too hot, a wound festers, a heart simply gives out. We wake to find the bunks emptier, the silence deeper. The guards come, dragging the bodies outside, tossing them into a pit behind the barracks. No graves, no names, just a heap of frozen flesh under the snow. I have seen men beaten to death for a stolen cigarette, for failing to stand at attention, for weeping in their sleep. Violence here is routine, as expected as the sunrise. Some of us resist, quietly. An extra crust slipped to a weaker man, a whispered prayer, a look of defiance when the guards pass. Most simply endure, shrinking smaller each day until the cold claims what the state did not. I wrap myself in my coat, tuck my hands under my arms, press my body against the wall for what little warmth it holds. Yura murmurs a song, something soft, wordless, a lullaby from his childhood. His voice is cracked, barely a thread, but it comforts me more than food. Somewhere outside, a dog barks, answered by the howl of a wolf. I wonder if the wolves remember us, if they wait for our bodies when the thaw comes. It is said the bones in these forests will outlast any monument. The guard returns, checks the locks, grunts his satisfaction. He pauses by the door, spits on the floor, then leaves. I hear his footsteps fading, the mutter of another guard, laughter sharp as the wind. I close my eyes, drift on the edge of sleep. Dreams come, of food, of home, of faces blurred by memory. In the dream, my wife waits by the fire, my daughter sings. But the warmth never lasts. I wake with a start, heart pounding, the darkness pressing close. Peder above me coughs again, a wet rattle. He whispers my name. I reach up, touch his hand, cold and trembling. He asks me to remember him, to tell his story if I ever leave. I promise, knowing the odds. He squeezes my hand, then is silent. The night deepens. The barracks settle into the uneasy rhythm of survival, men snoring, whispering, weeping. I listen to the wind, to the creak of the timbers, to the heartbeat of the camp. In the Gulag, each night is a test. Will you make it to morning? Will the cold or hunger or a fellow prisoner claim you before dawn? Or will you find, somewhere in the darkness, a reason to keep going? I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks with my eyes. I count breaths, count heartbeats, count the hours until the next siren calls us to labor. Outside, the snow falls, silent and endless, erasing all tracks. Sometimes I think of escape, not the kind with running and gunfire, but the slow escape of forgetting. If I let go of hope, let go of memory, perhaps the pain will fade. But then I remember Peder's hand in mine, Yura's song, the boy with the empty bowl, the man who told me of the river and the lilacs. As long as we remember each other, even here, there is something that cannot be taken. I will sleep if I can. I will dream if I am allowed. And when the siren sounds, I will rise with the others, face the guards, the cold, the hunger, the violence, and the endless, pitiless sky. I am a Zek, a number, a ghost in the Siberian night. But I am still alive. When the camp falls quiet, true night settles in. It is not the darkness alone that unnerves, but the way it thickens, pressing against the wooden boards of Barrack 7, sliding between our bunks, suffocating all but the shallowest whispers. The guards, for a few hours, retreat to their heated huts, and a fragile illusion of privacy is left to us. But no one sleeps deeply here, not when every creak of timber or cough in the dark could mean the beginning or the end of something. There's a rhythm to these hours, a tapestry woven from confession and concealment, violence and fragile grace. Tonight, as the wind moans outside and Peter's labored breathing slows above me, a hush falls, a silence not of comfort, but of anticipation. Some of us, the ones whose minds remain mostly unbroken, use these moments to remember what it means to be human. The men in my barrack are a map of ruined Russia. Here, a former Red Army officer sentenced for counter-revolutionary thoughts, meaning he disagreed with a colonel in public, and someone listened. There, two brothers from Odessa caught hoarding grain during the famine, their crime survival itself. On the lower bunk, Ivan, a petty thief, has served almost 7 years for a stolen coat, his sentence extended twice for fighting in the line. At the far end, near the door, is Marko, a silent Ukrainian whose real offense was never explained to anyone, not even to himself. And above me, Peter, the mathematician, feverish and fading. I listen to the men breathe, to the restless shifting, the bed springs creaking, and I know each by sound as much as by name. It is in these hours that stories are traded for crusts of bread, or the rarest of things. Trust. Tonight, Ivan speaks first, his voice rough but urgent, carrying just enough for the closest bunks to hear. "My brother was a soldier," he says, picking at the threadbare blanket. "He died at Kursk. My mother blamed me for coming home alive." There is a pause, then Yura murmurs, "We all came home to different things, some of us to bars, some to graves." Laughter follows, thin and sharp. It is not humor, but a release, a spark of shared suffering, a moment when the walls of the Gulag do not seem so high. Someone begins to hum, a lullaby perhaps, or a hymn long forbidden. The melody wavers in the darkness, threading through the barrack and resting for a moment on each pair of listening ears. Even the thief and the informer are quiet, drawn into this fragile communion. But there are other stories here, darker ones, hidden beneath layers of shame and necessity. Not all confessions are gentle. I remember the first time I saw a man die in the barracks, not by cold or illness, but by the hands of another prisoner. It was last winter, though time here is a blur, marked only by the number of men missing each morning. A fight broke out over a pair of boots, new and strong, coveted by all. The owner, a man called Victor, tried to sleep with them under his head. He did not wake. In the gray light before dawn, his bunkmate slipped a sharpened spoon between Victor's ribs and held him quiet until the spasms stopped. The boots were gone by morning, divided and traded away before the guards ever noticed the body. No one spoke of it, no one mourned. But that night, the whispers were colder. Petter stirs above me. His fever has made him delirious, and sometimes he calls out for his wife, Maria, or mutters mathematical formulas in his sleep. I try to comfort him, holding his hand, murmuring old lessons from my classroom. He calms, if only for a moment. At times, death in the barracks is sudden and sharp, a knife, a blow, a choking cough. At others it is slow, creeping like mold. I remember a man named Boris, once a postman from Perm. He survived 2 winters by keeping his head down, never crossing the thieves, never drawing the guards' attention. One morning he simply failed to get up. The doctor, himself a prisoner, trained in a Moscow hospital, said Boris had starved to death, though he still had all his fingers and toes. The hunger here does not only shrink the flesh, It hollows out the will. Some men talk in their sleep, reliving their crimes or their memories. One shouts for his mother. Another curses Stalin, his voice trembling with a hatred too old to be killed by cold. These outbursts are dangerous. If a guard hears, he might drag the man outside, into the snow, where he'll be made to kneel for hours, or worse. The wind rattles the window frames, and I imagine the outside, rows of barracks, dark and silent, snow piled against the fences, wolves moving just out of sight. In the far yard is the punishment pit, a black hole in the ground. A man can survive a night in there if he is lucky and stubborn, but most come out with their minds shattered if they come out at all. Tonight, Marco is awake, staring at the ceiling. He rarely speaks, but when he does, the room listens. Back home, he whispers, there was a woman in our village who could see the future. She said I would cross great water and come home rich. A laugh, bitter and hollow. Perhaps she meant this, he says, shaking his chains. No one has the heart to answer. Some men escape into memory, telling stories of wives and children, of meals cooked and fields harvested, of laughter and love. These are dangerous luxuries. Hope is not always a blessing here. It sharpens the ache, makes the loss more acute. Others retreat into silence, building walls inside themselves that no one can breach. I have seen men stare at the ceiling for hours, not moving, barely breathing, eyes empty as the sky outside. Once I tried to reach such a man, to speak, to remind him of who he was. He did not reply, not then or ever. He died a week later, his spirit gone before his body. Sometimes, violence erupts with no warning. A harsh word, a glance, an accusation of stealing, a knife flashes, a fist flies, blood stains the boards, and the guards are slow to intervene, or sometimes too quick. Their batons crushing more than bones. Tonight there is a scuffle at the far end of the barrack. Two men, both thieves, arguing over a hidden stash. The words grow louder, and then there is a crack, bone on bone. One falls, clutching his face. The other stands over him, breath steaming in the cold, daring anyone to challenge him. No one does. When it is over, the loser crawls to his bunk, bleeding and sobbing quietly. Tomorrow he may not wake. The guards come to check, their flashlights blazing in our faces. They see the blood, the bruises, and shrug. They're not here to keep us safe, only to keep us in line. A dead prisoner is less work than a rebellious one. When the barrack is silent again, Yura begins to speak. He tells us about a concert hall in Moscow, the first time he played for a real audience. His hands shape the air as if he still holds the violin, his fingers remembering notes that his body can no longer play. His voice trembles, but for a moment, the barrack is filled with music. I close my eyes, drifting on the memory. I see the stage, the bright lights, the applause, the way his face must have shone. It is a brief escape, a window to a world where men were more than numbers. There are rumors in the camp of uprisings, of plans to overwhelm the guards, to seize the food stores or make a break for the forest. But these are fantasies. Most of us are too weak, too broken, and the winter would kill us faster than any bullet. Once, in another camp, there was an uprising. The prisoners seized a guard, took his keys, and tried to run. The searchlights swept the yard, and the machine guns opened fire. In the morning the snow was red, and the survivors were sent to build a new barrack, one with fewer windows. I have learned that kindness can be as deadly as cruelty. Once I shared my bread with a new arrival, a man barely able to stand. That night someone told the thieves, and they came for both of us. They beat him for information, then turned on me. My ribs still ache when the weather changes, and yet without kindness, what remains? I cling to small mercies, a shared blanket, a whispered prayer, a moment of understanding in a world that demands we forget. In the deep night, a scream pierces the darkness. It is not uncommon. A nightmare, perhaps, or the final agony of a dying man. Sometimes it is a warning, a reminder that even in sleep, the Gulag claims its due. Peter above me stirs. He asks for water again, but there is none left. I promise to fetch some in the morning, if he lives to see it. His hand is cold, his pulse thin as thread. Sometimes I wonder if I will remember these nights when I am free, if freedom ever comes. Or will they fade, lost to the same oblivion that claims so many here? A distant whistle blows, perhaps a guard on patrol, or the signal of another escape attempt. We listen for the shot, the dull thud that marks the end. It comes, inevitably. I think of home, of Moscow's busy streets, the smell of bread and rain, the warmth of my daughter's hand in mine. Memory is both a blessing and a curse. It keeps me alive, but it also hurts more than the cold. A few men in the barrack pray, whispering words forbidden by the state. I do not know if God hears them here in this frozen hell, but their faith is a stubborn flame, refusing to die. There are ghosts in the Gulag, faces that haunt the edges of sleep, voices that echo in the darkness. They are the lost, the forgotten, the dead who were never mourned. I see them sometimes, standing by the stove, peering through the frost on the windows, lingering by the door. As the night stretches on, the barrack grows colder. The stove sputters, the fire dying for lack of wood. We wrap ourselves tighter, huddle closer, seeking warmth in bodies as starved as our own. Sometimes, the men talk of the future, of what they will do when they are free. It is a dangerous hope, one that the camp does not encourage. Most men here will die before their sentences end. But for now, we have each other, and the stories that make us more than numbers. Peter's breathing slows, becomes shallow. He squeezes my hand, eyes glazed but searching. "Will you remember me?" he asks, voice barely a whisper. "I will," I say, and I mean it. Outside, the wind howls, snow beating against the walls. The night will not end soon, but we endure, as we always have. This is the world of the Gulag, violence and memory, suffering and fleeting hope, a darkness broken only by the stubborn will to survive. I listen to the men around me, to the stories and the silence, and I know, as long as we remember, as long as we murmur our names and our truths in the night, the camp cannot have all of us. Not yet. The storm began sometime before dawn. We could hear it gathering, the wind hissing through the chinks in the timber, the groan of ancient trees straining under new weight. In Siberia, winter is not a season, but a sentence. It settles over the camp like a warden, sifting into our lungs, leaching the color from our skin and the hope from our bones. I lay in my bunk, feeling the cold grow heavier, pressing against my ribs and into my thoughts. Each breath sent a plume of mist curling upward, merging with the dozens of other clouds from the bunks around me. Men shivered, teeth chattering like castanets, some clutching thin blankets, others drawing their knees to their chests to shrink from the night. Sometimes, in that half-awake state where dreams slip into memory, I imagined myself at home, at the small kitchen table in Moscow, steam rising from a mug of tea, my daughter reciting a poem by the stove. The memory glowed so brightly that for a moment I could almost feel the heat. But the illusion broke quickly. The draft from the cracks in the wall stole into my bones, reminding me of where I was and what I had become. In the Gulag, the cold is a weapon. The guards wield it as skillfully as their truncheons or rifles, knowing well how winter can subdue the rebellious spirit more effectively than violence. If we displease them, they ration our wood, let the stove die, or open the doors to let the wind scour our skin raw. Outside, a whistle shrilled, summoning us to roll call. Even before the sun rose, before there was any promise of light, we were expected to stand in the snow, boots stiff with ice, our breath smothered by scarves or scraps of cloth if we were lucky. I groaned as I slid from my bunk, feeling the ache in every joint, a stiffness made permanent by months of malnutrition and the unyielding cold. Yura was already awake, eyes ringed with exhaustion, lips blue but moving as he muttered a prayer or a piece of music only he could hear. He clapped me on the back as we shuffled into the aisle, both of us careful not to draw attention. Some men moved slower, barely conscious. Pater was still. I reached up to touch his hand. It was cold and slack. His breath no longer misted the air. I felt a dull ache as I closed his eyes, covering his face with a rag. He was free now, I thought, free in a way the rest of us could only imagine. We filed outside, boots crunching on snow that had drifted overnight, up past our ankles in places. The guards herded us into lines, their voices muffled by scarves and vodka. They counted us, sometimes twice, suspicious of any error. Missing men meant paperwork, meant explanations, meant anger from above. This morning, 2 were gone. Pater, whose absence I had marked, and the boy from Novgorod who had dropped his soup the night before. No one spoke their names. The wind whipped around us, stinging eyes and peeling at exposed skin. A guard barked orders, and we shuffled to the work site. Today, the sawmill, a low, sagging building surrounded by piles of frozen logs, and the distant howl of wolves. Inside, the air was only marginally warmer. We took up our tools, splitting wood with numb fingers, eyes blurred with fatigue. If you slowed, a guard's stick would find your back. If you stopped, you were dragged outside to rests in the snow, sometimes for hours. Some men returned, shivering and weeping. Some did not. There's a certain logic to the brutality. The system is designed to wring every drop of labor from us before discarding the husks. Every calorie spent is measured against the output of wood, the piles of logs stacked high beside the sawmill. If we do not meet the quota, the rations are cut. If the rations are cut, more men fall. But the camp is not only a machine of suffering, it is also a crucible where strange forms of courage are born. During the lunch break, such as it was, a tin of gruel and a breath of warm air from the stove, someone passed me a scrap of paper. I turned it over in my mittened hand, careful not to draw a guard's notice. It was a poem, scribbled in pencil, the lines shaky but unmistakable. I am still here, my name not erased by wind or hunger, my soul not broken by stone or silence. I did not know who had written it. Perhaps Yura, perhaps someone else. But I folded it into the lining of my coat, a talisman against oblivion. Small rebellions bloom in the Gulag's winter. A stolen glance, a muttered curse, a hand extended to help another stand. Once, in the early hours before dawn, I saw a man sneak a piece of bread under his pillow and then break it in half to share with the man beside him. Such risks are not taken lightly. The thieves will notice and the guards punish collusion as harshly as they punish escape attempts. Yet solidarity is the only shield we have. It is built in the little things, a whispered song, a story told in the dark, a name remembered and spoken aloud when the roll call passes too quickly. At the sawmill, we work in teams. The old men teach the new arrivals how to wield an axe without losing fingers. how to move logs without snapping their spines. The guards would prefer we fight over the best tools, but we share them quietly, passing handles beneath the workbenches, patching broken ones with strips of wire and cloth. Violence is ever present, but so too is the quiet pact that keeps us alive. One afternoon, word spreads that the thief who rules Barrack 4 has been caught stealing food from the guard's kitchen. He is dragged out into the snow, forced to kneel before the barracks as the rest of us watch. A warning, the guards say, for anyone tempted to defy them. We stand in the yard, shivering and silent, as a guard shouts accusations. The thief is young, barely more than a boy, but already hard-eyed and lean. When the blow lands, an iron rod to the head, he barely flinches. Blood streaks the snow, vivid and shocking. Some men turn away, but most do not. We have learned not to betray emotion. The guards want fear. We give them stone. Later in the barracks, the men talk in low voices. Some say the boy deserved it. He took from us after all. Others mutter that the guards are worse, that the real thieves wear uniforms. No one says what we all know. Tomorrow it could be any one of us. Solidarity, such as it is, can be brittle. Fear fractures it, but necessity rebuilds. When the guards ration our bread, we pool what little we have, each man taking a turn with a slightly larger slice. If someone is caught, he suffers alone, but he is not forgotten. The cold grows sharper as winter deepens. Frost crystals form on the inside of the windows, growing in elaborate patterns like the lost embroidery of a vanished Russia. Men huddle in pairs, sometimes threes, sharing what little body heat remains. One night, Yura's cough worsens, a deep tearing sound that shakes his whole body. He spits blood into a rag, hands shaking, face pale as parchment. There's no medicine, only hope. I remember the violin in his hands, the way his fingers danced over the strings. Now his hands are raw, swollen, the nails black with frostbite. I take his hand in mine, warming it between my palms. He smiles weakly, squeezing my fingers. "Play for me," he whispers, eyes closed, and so I do, humming an old tune from Moscow, one we both remember from long ago. The melody drifts through the barrack, a ghost of music in the night. Small rebellions, small mercies. Another storm descends. The guards become irritable, snapping at each other, taking their anger out on us. We are forced to clear snow from the yard with bare hands, our gloves taken as punishment for laziness. Men's fingers crack and bleed, turning black at the tips. Frostbite is as lethal as any weapon. That night, Marko, the silent Ukrainian, does not return from the yard. Some say he fell, others that the guards lost him in the snow. His bunk is empty, his possessions quickly divided among the living. Solidarity is tested every day. Still, there are moments of quiet defiance. When the guards are distracted, we gather at the far end of the barrack, passing around a fragment of pencil and a torn scrap of newspaper. Each man writes a single word, his name, his home, a message for anyone who might one day find it. I write, "Sasha, Moscow, remember me." I pass it on. Sometimes a rumor stirs, a supply train derailed, a camp commandant punished for excess cruelty. The war in Europe turning in unexpected ways. We cling to these whispers, real or imagined, as proof that the world is still changing, that the camp is not the whole universe. When tempers flare, violence erupts, a theft, an insult, an old grudge reignited by hunger. Fists fly, blood is spilled, but the real battle is against the cold, the empty belly, the quiet that threatens to swallow our voices. At dawn, the siren wails again. Another day of labor, another day survived. We rise one by one, shoulders squared, eyes dull but not dead. Yura does not get up. His cough claimed him in the night. I sit by his bunk, holding his hand until the guards come to drag the body away. In the yard, the sun glints on the barbed wire, casting shadows that snake across the snow. We line up, shivering, waiting for the count. I look around, marking the empty spaces, the new faces, the survivors. Solidarity, I remind myself, is not always loud. Sometimes it is just standing next to another man in the wind, refusing to fall, refusing to forget. A new arrival joins our barrack, eyes wide and wild. We offer him a place, a crust of bread, a word of warning. He nods, grateful and afraid. The cycle continues: cold, hunger, violence, and the stubborn, unbroken will to remember. Even in the heart of winter, when the wind howls and the night seems endless, there's a flicker of warmth, a name whispered, a song hummed, a hand extended in the dark. We endure. In the Gulag, dawn arrives without promise. It is less a rebirth than a grim confirmation. You have survived the night. That, here, is victory enough. The first hints of light seep through the cracks above the bunks, cold, gray, barely distinguishable from the shadows. Someone stirs, the boards creak, and the familiar coughs, groans, and whispers begin anew. Each man moves slowly, testing limbs numbed by sleep and cold, uncertain if today will be like yesterday or their last. I rise, careful not to disturb the man now in Yura's place. Last night, Yura was carried from the barrack, wrapped in a blanket too thin for the living but generous enough for the dead. There was no ceremony. His violin, the one he had carved from memory with bits of scrap wood, disappeared before the sun rose. Nothing is wasted here. I take inventory of my own body, fingers, toes, knees, heart. They're all still mine, though changed. I've become smaller, leaner, harder, but something beneath the scars and hunger still flickers, something that resists erasure. We line up in the aisle as the siren wails, roll call, breakfast, work, the rhythm of existence. Outside, the wind has lessened, and the snow, untouched but for a handful of boot prints, gleams with faint, icy blue. The guards appear, stamping feet, counting us with their hollow eyes. They call names. Some are answered, some are not. The missing are noted without emotion. A corporal marks their absence in a tattered ledger. There are no questions, no moments of silence, only the routine. Those who are gone will be replaced, their bunks filled by new arrivals. The camp is an endless maw, always hungry. We march to breakfast, if it can be called that. A bowl of thin kasha, a cup of hot water. Sometimes there is salt, more rarely a trace of oil. Men crowd the mess hall, bowls clutched tightly, wary of thieves, always scanning for opportunity or threat. I eat quickly, watching the door. I have learned to protect my food without seeming too defensive. Open desperation is a beacon for predators. The day's labor is announced. Timber, again. The quota, impossible as ever, is stated with the impassive clarity of a death sentence. A few men protest, quietly, but there is no real defiance left this morning. We trudge to the worksite, breath steaming, faces set. The trees loom, ancient and indifferent. Axes rise and fall in tired hands. The world is reduced to simple equations: wood to be cut, calories to be burned, hours to be survived. At noon, the guards call a halt. We huddle around the stove, sharing the warmth as best we can. Someone produces a bit of contraband tobacco, a rare treat. The smoke circles above us, a brief reminder of pleasure. A new man, just arrived from Leningrad, asks about the camp's unwritten laws. He wants to know how to stay alive, who to trust, what bargains are safe to make. An old-timer, face carved by years of frost and sorrow, answers him. Don't make friends with the thieves. he says. Don't anger the guards. Save your strength. If you have something to trade, trade it quietly, and never, ever let them see you cry. The advice is taken in with a grave nod, and the young man tucks himself deeper into his coat. Some days there are accidents, real or engineered. A saw slips, a log rolls, a man falls and does not rise. The guards are slow to intervene, often quick to blame. Work harder, they say, as if effort alone can overcome starvation. There is amid all this a defiance that cannot be measured. It is there in the men who help each other up, who share a word, a story, a memory. After lunch, I return to the barrack to fetch a forgotten glove. Inside, the air is still and heavy. The bunks are mostly empty, but a few men have stayed behind, too ill to work or marked for punishment. Among them is Ivan, the thief whose fist broke another's nose the night before. His face is bruised, eyes swollen nearly shut. But when he sees me, he manages a grin, a flash of gold where a tooth should be. "Did you hear the news?" he whispers, voice thick with pain. "A new camp commander. Maybe things will change." I do not answer. Rumors of hope are as common as rumors of death, and nearly as dangerous. I pause at Yura's old bunk, fingers brushing the rough wood. Someone has scratched a name into the post. His own, perhaps, or that of a lost loved one. It is a tiny act of rebellion, a refusal to vanish without a trace. That afternoon, the wind shifts. For a moment, the sun burns through the cloud, and the snow becomes blinding, beautiful. A few men look up, faces bathed in the pale glow. It is enough, 1 minute of light, to remind us that the world outside the wire still exists. After work, we are herded back to the barracks. There's a sense of expectation in the air, a hush that feels almost sacred. Someone begins to speak, an old story, one told in whispers for years, handed down like contraband. It is a story of a man who escaped the camps, who found his way back to his family, who lived to tell the truth of what happened here. As he tells it, the men lean in, desperate for the hope, even if they do not believe it. The tale winds on, carrying us from the frozen forest into a world where justice exists, where wrongs are remembered and atoned, where suffering is not in vain. When it ends, there is silence, an ache of longing. But something in the air has changed. For a moment, we are not prisoners, not Zeks, but men with dreams, with families, with names. Night falls again, as it always does. But tonight, I do not fear the darkness as I once did. I lie in my bunk, arms wrapped around my knees, and let the memories come. I remember my wife's laughter, my daughter's hands, the sound of my own voice reciting poetry in a warm kitchen. These things are not lost, not while I can hold them in my mind. In the morning we will line up again, march into the woods, face the cold and the guards and the endless hunger. But tonight, I am alive. I am still myself. The camp cannot take that from me. A guard passes the door, his boots echoing on the boards. He pauses, listening, but we are quiet. In the silence, I hear the breathing of the men around me, a chorus of life. I close my eyes, and for the first time in many nights, I sleep. And when I wake, I will remember. For all those who are gone, for all those who will never leave, for Yura, for Peter, for the boy from Novgorod, for Marco and Ivan and the silent host of the vanished, I will remember. Because in the Gulag, survival is more than breathing. It is memory. It is hope. It is the resolve to carry one's story beyond the wire, past the frost and the pain, into whatever freedom might still be waiting. Let history count the numbers. Let the world debate the causes, the guilt, the madness of those in power. We who survived the winter winds, the violence, the endless nights, know another truth. There is something in us, fragile, fierce, impossible to name, that outlasts the cold. It is this, in the end, that the Gulag could not break.